Over the centuries and decades, a country's economic status can go from rich to broke really quickly. It's crazy to think that some nations that are struggling today were actually rolling in dough back in the day. Let's take a trip down memory lane and check out 10 countries that went from living the high life to hitting rock bottom. Thailand. Although Thailand's GDP per capita of about $6,000 is significantly lower than the worldwide average, these are areas of extreme poverty in the country. The Ayutthaya Kingdom, which included much of modern-day Thailand, was wealthier than many European countries in the 16th and 17th centuries. The nation's capital was as large and luxurious as Paris and served as a hub for global trade. The Ayutthaya Kingdom exchanged products with traders from more distant lands, including France and Portugal, as well as from China and Japan. So far, so good. But sadly, the boom period was short-lived. Early in the 18th century, trade went down, which severely impacted the economy, and there was always a risk of invasion from neighboring Burma. Soon after, in 1765, the Burmese army attacked, taking full advantage of the weakening kingdom to take control of the capital. 2 years later, Ayutthaya gave up and was severely smashed down. Then, at some point, the nation came back as the Thonburi Kingdom, which was the precursor of modern-day Thailand. But unluckily, it was significantly less powerful. Mali. With a GDP per capita of about $837, Mali is among the world's poorest nations. A large portion of the population is in this drought-prone African nation, which is listed among the 47 least developed nations by the United Nations. The country's economy depends mostly on subsistence farming to make ends meet. If you go back hundreds of years, you will be surprised to know that things were quite different. The nation served as the center of the Great Mali Empire and was among the richest and greatest in Africa. Under the reign of Emperor Mansa Musa, who ruled from 1312 to 1337, the empire reached the peak of its power. On top of that, due to its abundance of gold, the Empire of Mali possessed half the entire global gold supply. Timbuktu, the capital of the empire, was a renowned hub of trade, culture, and education, located in the midst of the Sahara Desert. Even though the Mali Empire lasted until the 16th century, its wealth and influence had significantly decreased by then. Mali is no longer the wealthy country it once was. It is just a shadow of what it used to be. Turkey. Turkey isn't so poor, but it isn't very wealthy either. The GDP per capita of the nation, which is roughly $11,000, which is less than that of much of Europe. This places Turkey in the category of developing market economies. The GDP of the Ottoman Empire, which gave rise to modern-day Turkey, was twice as high as that of Western Europe in the 16th century. The prosperous empire ruled over Anatolia and sizable portions of southeastern Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East in the middle of the century. Throughout the reign of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, the empire rose to the position of superpower. This was made possible because he oversaw a golden period of military success. Soon after, in the 1700s, the Ottoman Empire was surpassed by the colonial powers of Europe, and its expansion of territory slowed down in the latter part of the 16th century. By the turn of the 20th century, there were many internal conflicts, and the empire was breaking down. Unfortunately, after the nation supported Germany in World War I, the majority of its lands were taken. Following the Turkish War of Independence, the Ottoman Empire was raised from the dead as the significantly less powerful Republic of Turkey in 1922. India. India has a severely low GDP per capita of roughly $7,000. Even though the nation has made major progress recently to eradicate the worst forms of poverty, hundreds of millions of Indians continue to live in poverty. India wasn't always such a miserable country. The Mughal Empire, founded in 1526 and ruling over almost the entire Indian subcontinent, was swimming in cash during its heyday in the 17th century. With just less than 25% of the world's GDP at the beginning of the 18th century, Mughal India had surpassed China to emerge as the leading economic force on the globe. On top of that, up to the beginning of the 18th century, India was the largest manufacturer in the world, accounting for 25% of global industrial output. Although England had the greatest quality of living in Europe at that point in time, real earnings and living conditions were significantly higher in Mughal India. Unfortunately, the empire broke up because of internal disputes in the late 1700s, and the British eventually took control of it in 1858. By then, India's industries had been completely destroyed and the colonized country had lost most of its riches and influence. Latvia. After being ruled by foreign nations for many years, Latvia gained independence in 1918, and it was much wealthier than its Baltic neighbors. In fact, Latvia's economy flourished, driven mostly by robust exports of timber and agricultural products. And the country's level of living surpassed that of the Scandinavian nations. Unfortunately, the era of great wealth was not long-lasting. Both the Soviet Union and the Nazis destroyed Latvia during the Second World War, and the Red Army finally took control of the country. The nation joined the Soviet Union as a satellite state in 1944, and it remained under Soviet rule until 1990, when the Soviet Union effectively destroyed the nation's economy. Though it's currently a member of the European Union, Latvia has witnessed significant economic progress since regaining its independence in 1990. Despite this, with a GDP per capita of about $14,000, Latvia still lags well behind the Scandinavian countries it formerly outperformed. Cuba. Cuba has been severely disadvantaged by devastating US sanctions and decades of communist control. With a GDP per capita of only $7,815, the Caribbean island struggles to meet basic needs. Prior to Fidel Castro's 1959 takeover, the nation enjoyed one of the greatest GDPs per capita in the Americas, the second highest rates of telephone and vehicle ownership per person, and thriving tourism and sugar industries. Cuba was like a paradise for wealthy Americans. Soon after, it saw a sustained drop in GDP per capita after the revolution, following the end of Soviet subsidies in the early 1990s. The economy hit an economic crash and hasn't shown any signs of recovery. The GDP per capita is still less than it was in the 1950s. Iraq. The 1960s and 1970s saw Iraq rapidly advance to become a highly developed country. The Middle Eastern nation, endowed with abundant deposits of oil and gas, profited greatly from the surge in oil prices that resulted from the 1973 oil crisis. Iraq had one of the best living standards in the entire region. Since the 1950s, the GDP per capita has increased dramatically, more than doubling in the 1970s, and the nation boasts highly developed social services, infrastructure, and healthcare systems. The official takeover of power by Saddam Hussein in 1979 marked the beginning of Iraq's decline. The economy was destroyed by a catastrophic 8-year war with Iran. Conditions were made worse by internal corruption and the decline in oil prices. Wide-ranging sanctions were imposed on the economy throughout the decade, and by the decade's end, the GDP per capita had plummeted to a miserable $938. Zimbabwe. Since 2000, Zimbabwe has seen a wide range of financial catastrophes, from severe hyperinflation to a severe recession, going from being Africa's prosperous breadbasket to its worst-known economy. Because of its rich natural resources and profitable agriculture industry, Zimbabwe's economy was strong in the 1980s. Yet, as the country's financial condition deteriorated, cracks started to appear in the 1990s. Then the catastrophic policy of President Mugabe's administration started in 2000. It began to take the nation's highly productive white-owned farms. Due to the lack of expertise of the new owners, productivity quickly fell, severely harming the economy. The economic crisis was made worse by widespread corruption and hyperinflation. By 2003, 95% of people were unemployed. Since then, not much has changed for the better. For a while to come, most Zimbabweans' lives will probably remain tough. Nauru. The little island nation of Nauru in the Pacific was wealthy in the 1970s, benefiting from abundant phosphate reserves, which are essential for fertilizer production. The small nation had the world's highest GDP per person, almost reaching $20,000. The government invested $1 billion in trust funds, anticipating that the nation's phosphate deposits would eventually run out. However, the funds were mishandled and eventually depleted. Nauru was bankrupt after the mining industry collapsed in the 1980s. Soon after, the financial and telecommunications networks crashed. Since then, the financially collapsed nation of Nauru has been supported by foreign funding. The GDP per capita has fallen to about $8,000. Poverty is pervasive, and the future of the nation is quite dismal. Venezuela. Venezuela's economy has changed dramatically in the last few years, going from one of the best in Latin America to one of the worst. The economy, which was overly dependent on oil, was severely damaged by the dramatic decline in oil prices in 2014. During the prosperous periods, when the prices of oil were very high, the government was unable to diversify the economy. Severe shortages of food, medicine, and other necessities have resulted from the government's strict pricing regulations and rejection of external aid. The formerly prosperous nation is now experiencing widespread hunger, out-of-control criminal activity, and elevated social unrest. Thanks for watching till the end. If you found this video interesting, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to receive more content, and share with us your thoughts in the comment section. See you in the next video.